That's probably the most important chapter in the book in many respects, and that idea of dream big and then make it bigger. Because I think we all are limited by the paradigms that we're in. We're limited by the peer group we surround ourselves with. We're limited by the environment we grew up in. And it's negative that we hear about ourselves. You're not good enough. You do this, and that self-talk, we don't fix that, like I said earlier, then we're in real trouble. But once we start thinking about, okay, why can't I make this even bigger, right? I think most people limit their dreams and limit their potential because they have this intuitive fence around themselves that says, well, I only do what I can reasonably think is possible.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Peter Ruppert, who will share how to live a limitless life. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life, to wake up energized, excited about the day, to have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want, to be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today, we have a bunch of quotes from Peter's book. The first is by Albert Einstein. Never give up on what you really want to do. The person with big dreams is more powerful than one with all the facts. The second is by Buddha. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. The mind is everything. What we think, we shall become. The third is from Dan Millman. The secret of change is to focus all of your energy, not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And the final one, we don't know who said it. And if I asked you to name all the things that you love, how long would it take for you to name yourself? Wow, that's a lot of reflecting in such short quote. And it ties in with last week's action step, which was to think about what you're going to do today to improve your culture, your relationships, and your finances, and then to take one step in each of those areas. Have you defined your life? We talked about that in the last episode, along with the 100-year time horizon for a wealth building plan, and then just taking the one messy step. It's not perfect. Maybe it works. Maybe it fails. So what? Action begets action. Starting momentum is the hardest part. I'm going to ask you to hit pause here for a second and think. If you had limitless choices and big dreams, what are they, and what tiny step can you take towards them today? Go ahead, hit pause and think. Welcome back. We're going to chat about that and see how the process is messy and full of roadblocks. We're also going to chat about different kind of school system. So if you have kids that are struggling in the world of school and COVID, you may want to check that out. Our guest today is Peter Ruppert, who is the founder and CEO of iEducation Group, which operates over 75 Fusion and Future Academies for grades 6 through 12. It's a one student, one teacher classroom environment. He's a 20-year veteran of the education industry. He's opened over 100 schools and acquired more than 25 others. He's been president and CEO of organizations in the private school, charter school, and early education industries, and sat on his local public school board. He lives with his family in Grand Rapids, Michigan. His new book is Limitless: 9 Steps to Launch Your One Extraordinary Life. Let's meet Peter and hear his story. Welcome to Richer Soul, Peter Ruppert. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you so much, Rocky. My pleasure.
And I'm excited to learn from you today. Let's start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. I was one of 6 kids. I was the third of the 6, and we learned a lot about money. My mom and dad were both born in the 30s, and had gone through the tail end of the recession, and really drove home the value of a dollar and the importance of hard work in order to earn money. And so as kids, my dad was pretty firm about not giving us allowances, that our work around the house was part of, quote unquote, our rent. And so if we were to go make money, we had to go find jobs in the neighborhood, whether it was cutting grass or shoveling driveways in the winter, or doing weeding for neighbors, whatever it was that we could do to generate some money, spending money, if you will. So it was just a great lesson that we learned early on from my folks about the importance of hard work, and that hard work is how you earn money. I even had a little community paper route in my neighborhood for a while to try and earn a few nickels to help me when I was in middle school. But ultimately, that also led to my desire or interest in being an entrepreneur. And when I got into late middle school or early high school, I guess, my dad lent my 2 younger brothers and me the money to go out and buy a big riding lawnmower that we could use to start a lawn mowing business beyond just the 1 or 2 lawns that we kind of cut in the neighborhood. And we borrowed that money, and he set up a payment system where we basically 20% of all of our revenues would be given to him to pay off the loan, to pay off the tractor loan, until such time he was totally paid back. And then obviously at that point, the rest of the money became ours. And so that was a really exciting time for me to learn about business. And we started to steadily grow the number of customers we had. And by the time I got to the end of high school, I think we had 28 or 29 lawns that we did in our community every week. And really a fascinating experience with people working for us, mowing lawns on our behalf, et cetera. And then in college, I again got the entrepreneurial bug, and I started to think about other businesses. And the hard part about mowing lawns is grass grows in Cincinnati for 6 or 7 months, and I was only home for 3. So it was hard to run a business that did that. And so I ended up changing, and again borrowed money from my dad to buy a big pickup truck and a tank. And I created a driveway blacktop sealing business my sophomore year in college, I believe, and did that for 3 years. And same kind of thing. We would knock on doors at night, trying to convince community people in our neighborhoods, et cetera, to hire us to seal their driveway and repair their driveway, crack filler, et cetera. And just an unbelievable experience. We really hot work in the humid Cincinnati summers in the day, laying the sealer, but and at night we'd hose off and clean off, and then I'd go knock on doors in various neighborhoods around our community to do the selling. And so really a great experience. It was great money, and I was able to help pay for 50% of my college, which was part of my parents deal with us as well. And so really had a great grounding about the importance of hard work and the importance of money, and how the way to get money was to get yourself and try new things and work hard.
I think that's something that's been somewhat lost. I don't know. And we can chat about, because you're in the school space. Do you see kids doing those types of entrepreneurial things today?
Well, it's interesting. Not many. I think society's changed a lot. Some of those old school methods of bringing kids up is different. But there is some innovation. You see a lot of kids doing some interesting things on computers and technology and internet stuff that is very entrepreneurial. Different kind of entrepreneurialism than what I experienced and what my generation experienced with some of the basic things we were doing. But nonetheless, it's be out there. I do worry, though, about parents, forcing kids to find ways to generate money, right? And some families are great at that, and others either give out tons of allowances or pay for everything. It's a challenge to make sure that. But there's definitely some entrepreneurialism. I think there's a lot of interest in becoming entrepreneurs from young kids today.
Yeah, it seems every generation has their pluses and minuses on how you raise kids. And unfortunately, it takes a long time to see the results of what you've done and say, was that good or was that bad? I guess in another 10 or 20 years, we'll see how the current generation does with that. But I also had a paper route, and it helped me make a ton of money. And it was nice to have that experience of being able to do what you wanted as a kid and as a college student. With that. So then from there, you went on and you also went to Harvard Business School, correct?
I did, yes.
And so everyone thinks, okay, you go to Harvard, your life's set. Everything was perfect from then on out, right? Wonderful dream life.
Don't I wish? Yes. And so after Harvard Business School, and that's a story in itself, if I can mention that. Is
sure.
I was in college and it was in this honors business program that allowed me to do a semester-long internship during my junior year. And I went down to Dallas, Texas, working for an entrepreneur, again, with my interest in becoming an entrepreneur someday. And had never really thought about business school, much less Harvard. And it was funny, one time I was in the car, he was taking me on a customer call to one of their customers, and he asked me about my goals, and he said, "Hey, have you ever thought about going to Harvard Business School?" And I kind of almost rolled my eyes about, no, I haven't really thought about business school, much less Harvard Business School. And he proceeded to talk to me about how I think that, one, business school would be a great opportunity for you, and two, I really believe you can get into Harvard Business School. And that conversation, after I had a chance to digest it, it totally changed my life and my future, because I was a good student, but I wasn't a great student. And I was involved in a lot of activities and had some leadership positions, and I had these entrepreneurial experiences. And so, I was never considered myself a Harvard Business School candidate. But that conversation, after going back that night, and I wrote down this goal that I was going to really focus over these next 3 or 4 years to see if I could get into Harvard Business School. And I changed my plan and kind of down on my dedication to certain things that I thought would be of interest to the admissions. So I went home that night and I really started to think about it. And I said, oh my gosh, maybe I can. And so I sat down and I wrote down my goal that I wanted to get into Harvard Business School. And I started thinking about, okay, what would it take me to do that? And it just literally changed my thought processes and helped me think differently about my future. And ultimately, 3 or 4 years later, by doubling down on my dedication to try and be admittable, I ended up getting admitted and changed the trajectory of my life. And it just goes to show you the power of mentor champions and what they can do to help see the potential that sometimes we don't see inside ourselves.
And I think for a lot of people, they don't see potential in themselves. You don't realize your greatness. It's hard to see it in yourself. And we always downplay ourselves. And I think that was the biggest thing. When I used to coach soccer, I believed in the kids more than the kids believed in themselves. Like, they didn't know what it meant to win because they were always losing. I'm like, you guys aren't bad. You're actually better than these other teams, but you don't believe you can win. You've got the wrong mind. I worked on mindset more than I worked on skills, and that significantly turned it around. So yeah, having somebody believe in you and inspire you is a massive help. So you got into Harvard, you went through Harvard, then what happened?
Well, I had this desire to be an entrepreneur. I interviewed for different companies and really hoping to try and prepare myself for becoming an entrepreneur or starting a business someday, and ended up working for a consulting firm in the Boston area, and went to work there, and it was focused on small entrepreneurial businesses. And immediately after we started, I had a friend of mine from business school who had also graduated with me, and we decided that we wanted to create a new business and on the side just to see what it was like. And so we created this business that we didn't have time or money to really foster and grow. And that crashed and burned pretty quickly. And then 6 months after I started this consulting firm, my boss came to me there and said, "Hey, listen, we can go out and do this on our own and be more successful and do a better job for clients and make more money." And again, I'm so antsy to be an entrepreneur at 27 years old or whatever I think that's right. I jumped at the opportunity to go start a business with him. And so we started a consulting business focusing on helping companies grow, and had some early successes, just the two of us dialing for dollars, calling companies, smaller companies in the area and asking for appointments to come talk to them about our services. And we had some early successes, and we eventually grew in our first 4 or 5 years to have offices in 3 different cities in the eastern part of the U.S. and had some semi-retired execs who worked for us and would do some of the consulting. But as we continued to try and expand, we never properly capitalized the business. We didn't really know what we were doing and starting a business. And eventually our client list dried up. Several of our long-term clients decided that they didn't need us anymore, and our client flow of new prospective clients kind of dissipated, and all of a sudden we were stuck and had to close down the business. We just couldn't meet our obligations with the lack of clients, with the lack of billings coming in, and too many expenses to pay the bills, and ended up having to close the business down. And that was a really trying time. And so I was in my early 30s at that point, and had lost this business. And even that little side venture I'd started had kind of faded and failed. And so I was not in a great spot at 32 years of age, with our first child almost being born, and really difficult situation for me, for sure.
And what happened next?
Well, I talk a lot about the learnings that I have that I captured in my book, but I really had to dig deep, because I was, like I said, in my early 30s, and a lot of my friends, business school friends and others who were really taking off in their careers, and I was unemployed and married, and we were having our first child, and I was trying to figure out what was next. And I did a lot of studying of successful people. I just realized that I had to analyze and better understand what it is that made people successful. Because for me, I'd had these successful entrepreneurial ventures in high school and college, and I'd gotten into Harvard Business School, and I always kind of felt like I knew it all. But this was a real gut check to realize that maybe you don't know it all. And so in analyzing successful people, that's what led to my list of these 9 steps that I saw almost universally in the successful people I studied from all walks of life. And I captured those as kind of my strategic summary of here's the path to success, and did that out and kept that in my briefcase and used it as a constant guide and frankly, inspiration for me to kind of pull myself off the ground and start going forward. And so slowly we ended up kind of starting again as a smaller, much smaller, streamlined consulting firm. That wasn't what I wanted to do anymore. And eventually I got the opportunity to get into education, and was part of an education company that in the charter school world for a long time, and for 7 or 8 years for another gentleman. And that kind of got me back on track, and only to get into my next pitfall about 8 or 9 years after that.
It seems life is full of ups and downs for you.
It is.
You keep getting back up, which is, I think,
I did.
Important step.
No doubt. No doubt. I had led this education. I went to work in the healthcare industry, and one of these too good to be true opportunities that turned out to be a disaster. And so 6 months into that role, after leaving what had become a great opportunity or a great gig in the charter school world, I realized that this was completely different than what I thought I was doing, and ended up I had really not a good situation. So I resigned. At this point, my wife and I were expecting our 4th child. I'm unemployed at 43 and trying to figure out, what am I going to do? And you're right. It's just getting back up and thinking and crafting the vision for your future. And that's when I realized I was going to get back into education and start a company and really build it the right way. After learning so much in my earlier failures, it really helped prepare me for what is today Fusion Education Group and the organization that I run. And we've come a long way, but I spent 12 months unemployed, knocking on doors, trying to raise money to launch the company back in 2006, and finally was able to secure the financing right at the end of 2006. And I started as the only employee back in 2007, and that's what we've been doing ever since.
Well, congrats on that. Let's take a little shift here and let's talk about the book. So what inspired you to write the book, Limitless, 9 Steps to Launch Your One Extraordinary Life?
Well, what inspired me was that research I had done on successful people and that little cheat sheet I created for myself. I found that to be extremely helpful. I then got to when my oldest son, middle school at 12 years old, this probably 12 or 13 years ago now, I retyped that list I had been using and called it Traits of a Champion, and typed it out on one sheet of paper with a under each one of the steps and put it on their bathroom mirror, thinking that, well, my kids probably didn't want to listen to their dad talk about this is what you need to be successful. They might at least read that and take this into osmosis, if you will, whether they're brushing their teeth or washing their mornings. And then I shared the list at one of our conferences 4 or 5 years ago, conferences business, and got a lot of really positive feedback about how compelling those steps were. And several people said, you ought to turn that into a book. And so that's what really germinated the idea. And I really believe that there's so many people there who are struggling. And I have a lot of peers now who I know that look back on their last 30 or 40 years that they've been in the real world and saying, I wish I had done something differently, or what if? And this is hope to be a guide for people who indeed have dreams they still want to. Don't just want to settle for what they are as good enough, but are driven to not just accept things, but to plow forward and chase their dream, be able to develop a limitless life.
And I think, and you kind of mention it in the book too, I think most people are in the drift, right? They got put on a path, they didn't put intention and thought to it, and they're kind of going along and life is okay, but it's not great. And as I went through the book, the one thing I noticed is that there's a lot of process to it. I mean, at the end of every chapter, you've probably got 10 to 15 resources, which means even though the book itself is small, the work you have to do after reading each chapter is probably, I would almost guess, like 50 or 100 hours or more of going through all of the books you recommend, the videos, and all of the other information. So I appreciated that. But I think people need to know that creating success is not overnight, right? It takes time. Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform.
That's exactly right. And I think that's the piece. And what I try and do in those steps, as you read, is the first chapter is about winning the battle in your head, right? Nothing else you do until you can convince yourself that you are indeed qualified, that you do have potential, that you indeed are valuable and have so much potential and God-given capabilities that you can leverage. It's hard to go out and do other things. But to your point, one of the chapters I talk about is failing often. I think anyone who's going to start a journey, who's going to stretch themselves and really try and achieve their potential, is going to be pushing the envelope a little bit. When you push the envelope, you have struggle, and you're going to bump across some obstacles. You're going to fail a few times. And the important thing is, as we all know, failure is learning we ever have, and that's what makes us better. It's certainly been proven in my life. And I think as people read the book, they'll get that sense. There's a process to success. And to your point, there's a lot of reading in every chapter so that people can turn back to the book time and again if they want to dig deeper.
And I know one of the things you talk about is to take the time to think about what is an extraordinary life for you and to do it without constraints, to think, you really push people to think big and then say, go even bigger. And you do that, I think, for each part of life, because you talk about professional goals, health goals, spiritual goals, financial goals, family goals, very much in line what we talk about here. And to define what that is, and then I think we put limits on ourselves, right? We can do more if we can see it.
No doubt. And that's exactly right. That's probably the most important chapter in the book in many respects, and that idea of dream big and then make it bigger. Because I think we all are limited by the paradigms that we're in. We're limited by the peer group we surround ourselves with. We're limited by the environment we grew up in. And too often, it's negative that we hear about ourselves. You're not good enough. You do this, and that self-talk, we don't fix that, like I said earlier, then we're in real trouble. But once we start thinking about, okay, why can't I make this even bigger, right? I think most people limit their dreams and limit their potential because they have this intuitive fence around themselves that says, well, I only do what I can reasonably think is possible. And we just think about the human experience, and when you study amazingly successful people, again, in all areas, how people that you would never have thought could achieve or do the things that they have accomplished. It started with their ability to think way beyond where their present reality was. And that's the thing we all do, is the present reality, to envision a much bigger, brighter, in all areas of life.
And that's a shame that we limit ourselves, because until we let go of limits, you can't have a limitless life. The biggest thing I see people struggle with, and I think you talk about it in the book, is take the first step. Once you do that, everything else starts to get figure-outable. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. And again, I mean, if we think about all of us, I just think people in general have these dreams. Young, with each passing year, as we let our dreams get smaller, because the reality we currently face is holding us back. And so go around and we have these dreams and these ideas that bounce around in our head. They stay in there for a while. And then we think, well, we're going to go do this. And we promise ourselves we're going to go do this. And then we never. And then another idea comes in our head, or another passion that we want to go pursue comes along. And we promise ourselves it, and we never get started. And what I found is step one is always to dream big and then put it to paper. There's just so much research about when you write things down, when you write goals, detailed descriptions of your future vision, what your future is going to look like, your brain will constantly help you move towards that. So writing it down and then taking that first step. And just so many people never get out of the writing blocks because they refuse to take that first step. They're intimidated by all the work to get to the end goal. But it's like climbing up that mountain, right? If you're not willing to take the step, you're never even going to make any progress. And what I found, and I think others all have seen, is when you start taking that first step, all the other steps become progressive. And that is just such a big part of the book. It's a big chapter in the book where I talk about how too many people walk up to the starting line and then turn around and never have a chance to even see if they can possibly get there.
So in the book, you had this one quote, and I think this really kind of strikes home on the point that you're making. I still live with doubts about my ability to achieve my goals and dreams every day. We all do. Courage comes from finding a way to act despite having those fears. And so I think that's a big thing, right? We all have fears. How do we overcome them?
Yeah, no doubt. And I think that was one of the learnings when I was doing my studying of successful people, and I was that you see successful people nowadays, and they are, we have them up on this pedestal, and we just assume that they were always born with 100% confidence. They were always born and they had a straight line to success, and they didn't have any failures or obstacles. And so often when you peel back the onion on someone like that's life, you realize how much of a challenge it was and how many failures they had along the way, and how their road was just as rocky, if not more rocky than many of ours. And so that courage to see through that is really important. And I talk about it in the first chapter in that Win the Battle in your head, is that any kind of new situation or no matter how old you are or what level of success you've had, I think we all have these self-doubts and we all have this positive voice and this negative voice that both talk to us all the time. And what I found in my own life and in studying successful people is that those people who are able to achieve their dreams and live that extraordinary life are people who are able to ensure that their positive voice speaks much more loudly and gets a lot more airtime than the negative voice, and they train themselves to ensure that that's how they think, that's how they build their confidence and build their self-image, et cetera, so they can indeed, even when they're facing doubt or concern, are able to move forward successfully.
And we are going to have both voices, and you have to learn to overcome the negative voice. I mean, whichever one is louder is the one that's going to win. And you've got to learn to tell one of those voices to be quiet. It's a skill that's learned. It takes effort, and everyone goes through it. And I think that's the thing we don't talk about.
Right. And I think for many people, me included when I was younger, I thought I was the only one who had self-doubts or concerns and had this hesitation when I was trying to go for something big. And eye-opener when I started to get older and realized that, no, everybody has these things. And we all have these concerns and these insecurities. And like you said, the power is being able to position them right so that you can still have your positive voice carrying through.
So very true. Now, one of the things I think that gives people that negative voice is they don't think they're talented. But you talk about the power of hard work and dedication versus talent. What have you found?
I've just seen time and again, and I think we all have, when you're growing up in middle school, high school, and even beyond, you see these extremely talented people who just have all the tools, whether it's intellectually or athletically or academically or whatever it might be. And many of them never are able to leverage those tools when they become adults for lots of different reasons. And one of that is work. And then at the same time, you see a lot of people who kind of muddle through the early years of their lives, but buckle down when you get to their adult life and you start pursuing their dreams and are really willing to do whatever it takes. They have that grit. They have the willingness to put in the hard work and put in the hours and give up other things. And I've just seen time and time again from peers and friends and my own experience that those people who are willing to do the work and go above and beyond are the ones who are going to be successful. And it's just proven that when folks are willing to put in the hours and do the work and roll up their sleeves, they're going to surpass someone who just has the talent and sure they leverage that talent.
One of the things that I noticed you mentioned in the book, and we've kind of alluded to it a little bit, is the power of having a champion that kind of pushes you along. What have you found?
Well, and that's just another really important lesson that I learned. I think when I was younger, like I mentioned earlier, I felt like I had all the answers. I didn't really need help, right? But in the reality is as I've gotten started, it's been, or as I went down the path, I realized that you need mentors. And again, my research showed that so many of these successful people that we all read about and admire had tremendous mentors who helped them along the way. And it's almost like a coach, right? Even today, having coaches is really important in my role and for many people, that someone who's there to help you and who can guide you and kind of help you see around some corners and encourage you, which is so important, because to pursue your dreams by yourself can be very, very lonely, because inevitably there's ups and downs like we talked about. And finding that champion, whether it's someone who's 10 or 15 or 20 years older, who's kind of been there and done that and can really help you out, or if it's a peer group of other people with like-minded goals and objectives that really want to pursue their own dreams, having those kind of mentors, those kind of champions in your life is vitally important, and I highly recommend it.
And that's what I found. I always like to look at people who are 20 years ahead of me and to study them both from the good and the bad. Like, are they where I want to be in 20 years? Is that the way I want to look as far as like health? Is that the way I want to be living in 20 years? And then, asking them, what are the steps that I can end up being that? Because for me, 20 years from now, I'm 75 and I don't want to be, with a cane and barely able to walk. And, I want to be 100% fully active. And I've seen a lot of people who are in their 70s who are very active. I'm like, I want to learn what they did and follow that path so that I can enjoy myself as I age and get a little bit older. So let's kind of shift gears a little bit. I think for a lot of people, this past year has been very difficult on the education side. You run a large education program called Fusion, and it's a little bit different than what we traditionally see. Can you tell us a little bit about what Fusion is?
Absolutely. Yes. Fusion Education Group is the organization that I run, and we have two models called Fusion Academy and Futures Academy, and very unique and powerful program. Our schools are private schools. They focus on kids 6th through 12th grade, and our program is entirely one-to-one, meaning in every classroom we have one teacher with one student. So in that setup, we're able to really have a big impact on students, because our teachers can be mentors as well as teachers. And what we found is when it's just you and your teacher, the teacher can do a wonderful job of really understanding what makes their students tick, their hopes, their dreams, their fears, their frustrations, and really build that relationship, build that trust with them. And then once they are able to establish that trust, we can then customize how we teach each of our students so that we can go as fast or as slow as they are able. We can go backwards and start at an earlier grade level, for instance, if a student is struggling in a particular subject, and then we can accelerate from there.
Do you find that with one-on-one teaching, kids are able to learn a lot faster?
Oh, for sure, for sure. And that's one of the reasons that we can make it all work, because when it's just you and your teacher in a one-on-one classroom, our scheduling is much more like a college schedule, if you will, where you might have your classes in a particular subject a couple or three times a week versus every day for an hour like you would in a traditional public or private school. And then we'll have our student go off and do more independent work in what we call our homework cafes, which is their time when they, after their lesson or after their session with their teacher, they'll go off and complete their homework or do additional independent studying in order to master the material. And so we find that time and time again that our students are able to accelerate their learning through this kind of a setup much more effectively than you can in a traditional school, which makes sense, right? When you have 25 or 30 kids in a classroom, trying to teach them all at different levels is not easy by any means.
It's not. And I don't think what people realize is when you're in a classroom with 25, 30 people, a lot of times it's the weakest link is the level that you go at a lot of times. Or if unfortunately your kid's the one struggling and everyone else is flying ahead, then they get further and further behind, which has a big issue with regards to the mindset of it, because then they don't think they're good enough. And then you start this whole nother rigmarole going. So when you can have the one-on-one and the help, it makes it dramatically faster. So is it all in person or is it also virtual and online?
Yeah, great question. So we have about 78 or so physical schools around the country that are in person, or generally in person. With COVID, that's changed. All those schools converted to 100% virtual when COVID hit. And then many of our schools are now back as kind of a hybrid, right? We kind of leave it up to the teacher, leave it up to the family on whether they are comfortable sending their kid to a school, physical school in our buildings yet or not. And so some kids are coming back full time, others are part time, and others remain 100% virtual for now until we get through this COVID situation. And then we also launched in September, perfect timing for us, our virtual school that we call Fusion Global Academy. And so now we're servicing students all across the country, even when we don't have physical schools, and even in the world. I think we have kids from 35 or 36 states now enrolled in our Fusion Global Academy. And internationally, we have kids representing 8 or 9 different countries that attend as well. And so just getting started at that, we're just a semester in, but the feedback has been great. And that idea of the one-to-one education with those teachers who can really provide that mentoring time for a student on their academic, social, and emotional development, and at the same time provide that customized educational process really has proven to be a great recipe and has created a lot of excitement around our new virtual school.
So people are always going to ask, I mean, how affordable is it?
Yeah, and that is the challenge. There's no doubt. As private schools that are taught one-to-one, it is expensive. And so typically our schools, for a full-time student attending one of our schools, is going to be in the low $30,000 a year and can escalate from there depending on where the city is located and what grade the student's in and how heavy of a schedule they take. But it's an expensive proposition, as you can imagine, when every class is taught one-to-one. It makes it hard. And so we have created a scholarship foundation, or we actually have some parents of ours who created a scholarship foundation. And so we're in the midst of trying to support that so that we can continue to give more and more kids who otherwise couldn't afford it a chance to attend one of our Fusion Academies or Futures Academies across the country.
And I know now more than ever that is the constant conversations that tend to be going on with a lot of parents is, depending on what school system you're in, many of them, unfortunately, have not adapted well to COVID. And a lot of the kids are way behind. And so maybe it's worth it to, take a year out and get yourself regrounded and pushed ahead, because I'm guessing that if a kid's struggling, within a year, you can make tremendous progress and kind of help push them forward and get them on track or back on track so that they do have the ability to thrive and succeed going forward.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And many of our families will come to us exactly that for a year or so, and with the hope of going back to their traditional private or public schools. And we enroll kids all year long because kids hit struggles or fall behind or need additional help throughout the year. And so because it's one-to-one, we can start a semester on any day of the year. And that really provides a great vehicle for families when they just realize their son or daughter needs more, and they can bring their student to Fusion. And sometimes they stay for a year or less, and other times they'll stay with us in 4 or 5 years and graduate from our schools. And so we're designed to help, to meet the needs of any family who's are trying to get the best educational opportunity for their students. And the one-to-one vehicle has really proven to be a home run for so many of our customers.
And that makes a ton of sense. And I know some of the people that I hang out with, they're having conversations of if their kids aren't in school all day, they get the opportunity on a Friday to go, let's go skiing. Let's go do something, let's go have fun. And they're having a more enjoyable life. I'm assuming that because they're one-on-one, they can block time off so that the kids actually have more time to do some of the things they might like to pursue or more time with family.
That's exactly right. And that's been one of the big selling points for us, in that because it's one-to-one, because we can go through material more quickly in that kind of environment, students don't need to be at school all day long every day. And so many families will arrange their schedules so they can have Fridays off. Think of people who are athletes or actresses or musicians who need those long weekends, need those flexible schedules. We can provide that for them. Some families want to find a way for their student to be in school all day, and we certainly meet those needs. But yeah, the flexibility that we can provide with school days starting at different times for different kids really works out. I mean, we have some kids who just don't come to us until the afternoon. They do all their school during the afternoons. And others come early, so they have more flexibility and more time. And another big focal point of ours is that our students, because after their one-to-one class, they move into our homework cafe for their homework time. And so in the vast majority of cases, our students don't have to take homework home because they're completing their assignments on campus in our homework cafe, which are directed by our teachers who are monitoring and helping the students as they go through that process. So it really works well for home and opportunities for students to do more than just school and homework all day long.
That is the complaint I've heard in the past. I mean, clearly, I don't think it's happening this year, but some of the kids just have so much work piled on them that they don't have time. They're like running them ragged, and that's not fun. And so creating the space to learning is definitely worth it. So how do the book and the school go together? Do some of the principles that you come out from the book, are they infused into this education?
They are, and in two different ways that they came about, right? The original Fusion Academy campus was founded by a woman by the name of Michelle Rose Gilman, who's still a partner of ours and tremendously talented person who created the model that we acquired back in 2008, and we've been replicating it ever since. And so, I was not smart enough to create that model like she did, but we've just had a lot of success expanding it and rolling it out and improving upon it over time with some great people in our organization. But the principles are so similar. Michelle used to say, you're so much more than your grades to students, because, to really create successful citizens, we have to think not just about academic success, but social and emotional success. And in today's day and age, with the pressures and the challenges that kids face, our environment really allows us to help students win in all three of those areas, so that they ultimately can be prepared to go out and really pursue their full potential. And it's a lot about how our program works and how we focus on students. And at the same time, my book is all about that, Limitless, et cetera. 9 Steps to Pursue Your One Extraordinary Life has a lot of the same components, in that we think about the importance of goal setting in the schools, as I do in the book. We think about dreaming big. We think about getting up when we fall down and rebounding from failure. And a lot of those lessons are in both entities, although they came together in different ways, if that makes sense.
It does. And when you're working one-on-one with a teacher, you get direct support. And I'm assuming if there's not a good fit, they can find a different teacher that is a better fit for the kid and their learning style.
Absolutely. And again, that's the beauty of the model. With one teacher, one student, we can maneuver things around. When a new student enrolls, we have a thorough process that we go through with the family and with the student to understand what's going to work for them. And then we can really kind of pick the right teacher for the right student in most cases. And it inevitably works well. And our teachers, we spend a lot of time looking for two things, really: content expertise, so they're an expert in their subject, but also their ability to build relationships with people and really students. And so we take a lot of pride in the amazing things our teachers are able to do. And so it works out that our students benefit from having teachers who know how to build relationships with students, who know the material and can really impact their lives in a positive way.
Well, congratulations. I think it's, COVID probably made you very popular just because of what is going on in the rest of the world. I mean, we had trouble before COVID. My kids are in college now. But these are the kinds of things that we were looking for, is alternative ways to educate that are more focused around running at the speed of the kid with the needs of the kid. And so that is very cool. So we always like to ask for an action step. What is something that people can do this week to move forward in their life?
Well, I guess selfishly, the first thing I would suggest is people who really are interested in pursuing their dreams and not settling for where they are, to purchase my book. And by the way, all the proceeds of our book go to our scholarship foundation. But that's a great way to have that game plan. If someone doesn't want to do that, then I think the most important thing I would send a message on is, one, always remember that you have this negative and positive voice in your head. And those who are successful realize that and are able to make sure that they create a lot more airtime for the positive voice, because we all have so many God-given talents that we can leverage as we move forward in our future. And then secondly, really take time to write down your vision in as much detail as possible. The more specific we can be about what our future life is going to look like, the more opportunity we have and the greater the chance we'll actually get there. And your mind and subconsciously will start supporting that and moving in that direction. It's just amazing. So anytime we write down our goals, whether they're short-term goals for this quarter or for this year or longer-term visions, that is dramatically increases your chance of success, and something that very few people in the world today spend time doing. So it's a great way to help you kickstart your future.
That it is. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Dreaming big and writing down my goals in as much specificity as possible.
And we talked about that. That's what the book is all about. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
That everyone lives with self-doubt at times, that failure is an important part of life, and that even the most successful people have had many obstacles and trials and tribulations along the way.
And I think what people don't realize is you can't be happy and successful if you haven't seen sadness and failure. Like, happiness and success don't exist without the other. So you got to find that balance. So this is one that's probably right up your alley, because you've probably got a few of these in your schools. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
I would say surround yourself with other like-minded people who have dreams and goals that are similar to yours. that's where many people get stuck because they stay with the same friend group. And unfortunately, too many of our friends want to keep us down, not support us in our drive to go pursue our dreams.
And I think the biggest struggle that I've seen 18-year-olds have is finding that cohort of those people. We all live in little fishbowls, and they're out there. The other kids are out there, but finding them isn't always easy. And that seems to be half the struggle. But little by little, they find each other. If people would like to learn more about you, the school, the book, what's the best way for them to find you and learn more?
Thank you, Rocky. Probably the simplest way is people can go to my website at PeteRuppert.com, PETE, and then RUPPERT.com. There's information about me. There's information and links to our Fusion Academy and Futures Academy websites. And then there's a link to purchase the book right there on our website. Alternatively, you can certainly go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble. It's available on both of those websites, and just search Limitless Peter Ruppert, and the book will pop right up, and you can order it directly from there as well.
And I will put those all in the show notes to make it easy for people to find you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rocky. Thanks so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Life is messy. It's not a straight path to success, even if you graduate from Harvard Business School. I'm so excited about the future of education. It's going to be more of a one-on-one model, and in some cases, but I don't think it needs to be live. If you haven't read Ready Player One, I suggest you check it out. It's not at all about education, but the education system in the book is going to really change things when it's a reality. And the cool thing is, people are working on it right now. So, do you have a limitless life? Are you going to live it? Or are you going to waste it? This week's action step was to find the positive voice and drown out your negative voice. Figure out which one wins and write your future vision for the life you want. Life is simple. Doing simple is hard. We all want overnight success and some complicated plan. Well, neither of those work. It's a slow, messy process, and it requires a lot of thinking time, which means you need to turn off the noise. Carve out thinking time for your life and make it happen. Next week, we're going to cover that with Hale Dwoskin, who's going to talk to us about living in harmony and abundance. Hey, if you liked today's episode, would you do me a favor and share it with a friend or a family member? I'd appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too. Giving them the gift of a limitless life is pretty cool. Thanks so much for listening. Have an abundant week.